Well, Sam Monaghan, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Dan. Thanks very much for having me.
It's
Appreciate it.
absolute pleasure, mate. You are a fiery, you're a station officer, and you're also a member of the Australian Urban Search and Rescue Team, which sees you sort of tasked with helping out in floods and bushfires and even going overseas. We'll get to all of that, but I thought it'd be interesting to share with our listeners. Like, we actually met when you came into the Penrith Panthers to, a bit of research, bit of PD for yourself, but also ended up presenting to the boys. So how did that come about? What sort of led you to get in contact and reach out to the Panthers and find your way in there?
Yeah, I had reached out to the Panthers. In my experience as a firefighter, I guess I'm, working in kind of high pressure environments. So I have experienced the difficulties associated with, I guess, the mental game behind working in those areas. And it's over the years developed a bit of a curiosity for me whether we can use kind of sports psychology in the same way that obviously sports have, but the military have used it to improve their performance in those pressure moments. Yeah. And I guess I'd look at the Panthers, especially the last few years, as a consistent team, their culture, their resilience through the changing staff that they've had over the last few seasons, as a group who obviously employ their mental skills coach and mental skills throughout the day. So I was more than happy to be invited to speak. I just wanted to come and observe how they integrated their practices into the day. And I'm really appreciative of the staff and yourself, especially Coach Ivan. I really noticed his curiosity, the way he kind of leads his team by stepping back and letting other people step forward. I think he's quite a powerful figure in that way. Yeah,
I think it's a real point of difference actually with a lot of other coaches. I'm not saying every coach, but a lot of coaches. Just that it's the confidence or the confidence and just the manner in which he can step back to allow others to do their role, right?
It stood out.
Yeah. Well, as I said, I was actually really stoked because the way it came about was, we actually had, I was chatting with Kevy at the Panthers, and he said to me, he was like, I've met this fiery who's keen to come in, and there's a podcast, and so I listened to this podcast. I was like, absolutely, let's get him in. I know he wants to come and learn from us, but I reckon I'm going to learn as much from you. And it's sort of tapped into this interest I've had over the past probably year, 18 months in particular, kind of just looking at how first responders in general manage pressure, manage those real high stakes moments. And my curiosity, I guess, has been around do the techniques, or what techniques do they use which they could hold in other domains, and vice versa, like other things that we're, as you already alluded to, we're coaching in sport that actually are versions of what people are doing at the pointiest end, with the literally life and death pressure. Before we get there, because it's not all life and death. It's sometimes it might be quite mundane, it might be quite quiet in the world of a firefighter, but then within an instant it could be pretty meaningful, pretty chaotic, pretty high stakes. So, just for the benefit of those who have only really either seen it in Hollywood or had to evacuate an office building because of a fire alarm, which didn't, was because someone burnt soup, just take us into the real life world of a fiery. Like, what is it like, and day to day, the kinds of things that you go, the speeds you operate at, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, cool. You're right on many points there. It's probably not like Hollywood, which jams all the kind of best jobs of the year together into one shift. You will get quiet times and busy times. Firefighting is incredibly unique in many ways, starting with coming to work for not the day, but like a 24-hour shift. And we come into our fire station, that's really our home for that period. We have our other firefighters that we work with. So I work in a team of 6 people who man 2 different trucks. And, we've got a lot of jobs that we need to do before or that go around or alongside responding to emergency events. But yeah, just living in the firehouse, as they call them in America, we cook in there, we eat our meals in there together, we rest and have downtime in there. But what a normal day would look like is pretty busy, and I guess we'll talk a lot about preparation today, because we can kind of never know what we're going to turn out to. So we spend a lot of time checking equipment, training for specific jobs, or just training generally as a group. We've kind of shifted some of the jobs that we do to more connect with the community, I'd say, and since I've been a firefighter in the last 15 years. I think there's a bit of work going on shifting from kind of a protector mentality where we wait till something bad happens and we step in between danger and those people, to more a system of trying to partner with our community and recognising vulnerabilities or unsafe conditions within the community. So some good work that's been done in New South Wales relates to installing smoke detectors into homes, identifying issues with lithium-ion batteries, speaking to school students about road safety, that kind of stuff. So as much as we can be a big part of the community, we serve that community better through partnership than just responding. So beyond that, though, we do respond to emergencies, and I guess where the interest from like you've mentioned, from a sports club to hear about how firefighters deal with pressure can stem from how we, respond to those bigger emergencies. And the uniqueness, again, of firefighters is that we're kind of generalists. We get called to all types of things, not just fires, and we need to be kind of experts in a whole range of things.
For example, what sort of things might you get called to, which aren't fire? Yeah. I mean, other than cats up trees and things.
No, cats up trees for sure. And you can start with fires, because even a fire could be in a residential tower in the middle of the night with a high occupancy load, or it might be a commercial building at a different time, and they'll have all different patterns through those buildings and fire engineer conditions. So we need to, be experts at how to deal with those different systems. Beyond fires, we get called to rescue incidents. And again, with just a few moments' notice, the bells will go off, and it could be anything from someone trapped kind of safely in an elevator, or a kid whose finger or hands stuck in a toy or a swing or something, right up to a full-on industrial machine that's fully trapped someone's arm or limb, with highly serious consequences. And the firefighters need to be kind of experts and have systems to navigate through that uncertainty of how to dismantle and cut and take apart and make space in this machine that they might have or will have never seen before, or never had any knowledge of. Again, all within a few moments' notice. Hazardous materials is a similar one. We have some good knowledge of dealing with different chemicals and hazards. But I've used to be stationed at a station near Sydney University, and we got called to a hazardous spill of some sort, and the chemistry professor kind of just said, "In there, mate, you go and fix it," as if I'd know more than him.
You're the professor, mate.
That's it.
What I'm hearing, that's really interesting, which I think probably it's one of the things I imagine that sets first responders like yourself apart from, and I'm just going to use the very broad, the general population, general workers, is that for the most part, and maybe I'm speculating too much here, but for a lot of us listening, kind of know what they're going to be faced with, and that's probably compounded by the fact they kind of know when they're going to be faced with it. Like, the meeting is in the calendar. The lesson is on the timetable. The game is on Saturday. Whereas for you don't know what you're going to be faced with, and you don't know when.
Like you mentioned, there won't be any notice once things occur. We'll be there in a few minutes. And I guess, like I mentioned, we won't be able to plan for every circumstance. what we want is just a series of, good decision trees and systems to navigate our way to resolving the incident.
So let's talk a little bit then about, I guess, just the general ways in which you manage that. We'll talk about the training shortly, about how you get to this, but I'll give you an example of something that I hear a lot of when I'm working with people in different domains, is that they can't switch off. Yeah, they can't switch off, and they mean literally, like they can't switch off their phone, or they can't switch off mentally because perhaps maybe this phone can't be switched on, and they feel like they're on call. What's it like to actually be on call, and how do you not be operating in this constant, oh, it could be now, could be now, could be now? Is that a character trait? Like, because obviously firefighters do self-select to a fair degree. Is it a character trait? Is it something you see that's just in a lot of people in your workspace, or is it we have to train that? We have to be quite deliberate. We give ourselves other things to focus on. Like, how does that play out?
Yeah, I think firefighters are helped by a bit of a natural pace through the day. Like I mentioned, there will be times that we're called on to respond to incidents, and that is hanging over us through day and night. The bells do keep going off, but through when we finish those events, it is resolved. We'll hand that event over, and again, we've got systems to kind of draw a line under our actions and our legislative requirements. So when we leave that incident, I guess it doesn't typically linger on or keep in our minds in the day. In the same way, someone working another job might have a project or a big task that they need to think about for the entire week. And some of it stems from even during an incident, we have separate milestones throughout it. And that helps us really focus on what's our best action at a particular time. For example, at a fire, we'll kind of define, when someone might be trapped or a life might be at risk. But we really importantly designate through, and we communicate the point that there's no one trapped, there's no life at risk, and we'll change our speed, we'll lower that tolerance to risk that we might have at that stage. And again, once the fire's out or the unsafe condition ceases to exist, we'll really communicate that, and we'll have a refocus to say there's no risk at the moment, so let's not put ourselves in any risky spots. Thinking like that, throughout the day is to focus on the best action and the most appropriate kind of level of excitement and level that we want to be. And most firefighters are pretty well versed at coming back to the station and not holding on to the job.
Yeah. So I mentioned it, you've mentioned it, this idea of operating at different speeds.
Yep.
So it's not all go. Your central nervous system isn't constantly on high alert, vigilant, but you're quite deliberate in dialing it up when it needs to be and quite deliberate in dialing it down when you can. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And I don't think there's too many firefighters that need to dial it up as we're getting kind of information about a job.
Yep.
It'll start with the initial stimulus about bells going off, and will be leaked information through, whether it's a house fire, rescue or whatever.
Yep.
And based on the information, I guess firefighters' natural level of arousal tend to, meet the requirements of the job. What
about over arousal?
Yeah, so I don't think firefighters suffer from being under aroused.
Yeah.
So what's important is to teach them, how to deal with being over aroused. I think firstly having an awareness that is a thing, that there's an arousal level, and that it will eventually affect how we perform under pressure. And then teaching people, various skills. So be it breath work in the truck on the way to a job. So we're probably going to be going to a job, and it'll take 5 or 6 minutes to drive there. In that time, we can't perform, we can't affect the job. So that's not a useful time to be ramping ourselves up. When we get to the job, we will have a whole range of tasks that we need to do. And that can be a really overwhelming time. You might have, the fire occurring, people coming down the street to yell at you and point to you what their experiences has been, or or where they think you need to go. You'll have other crews also trying to interact with you at the job. You'll have a whole bunch of hazards that you need to, I guess, account for and do something about, like turning power off, like checking out all the walls to see if one of them might collapse or the part of the roof might collapse. So all of a sudden you've got probably more than 10 things to be thinking about in a hurry. You've got a lot of spinning plates up in the air, and it's not possible to kind of maintain awareness of that many things at once. So you just need to be really specific in triaging that information. And as much as we can, just try to focus on what we can control.
Yeah.
So that'll kind of include the people coming and talking to us, and a few other factors we'll try to just ignore, and we'll say there would have been a lady I met a few weeks ago, and her unit was on fire, and she probably thought I was pretty rude because she was trying to tell me how the fire started and what the neighbours are going to think and how long she's been living there. And I had to kind of be quite direct in saying, hey, my guys are going to go through that door. How are we going to get to that unit which is on fire right now? We're going to go up the stairs. Do we turn left? Do we turn right? And if we can just kind of focus on those simple things, then we're starting to get water on the fire. Things will start to relax down. It takes a series of actions that have a positive effect on the incident. So turning power off, getting water on the fire, identifying, whether there are people trapped or not. And if you can get those series of actions in a row, we start to have a win.
Yep.
If we can't get those series of actions in a row, the fire's spreading, more people are coming, becomes more chaotic, and it's harder for us to deal with.
Yeah, when you said, in the in the truck on the way, you can't do much to impact the situation. But I also heard you say you'll do some breath work.
Yes.
Right. And again, for the listener listening, they might not be aware of what breathwork actually is. So, and I appreciate this, it might be something different for each member of the team in that truck. But for you personally, when you're en route to an emergency, and you know it's more than a cat up a tree, what are you being really deliberate about in preparation for it, so that when you arrive there, you can run through that checklist in the manner you've just said without getting confused, without losing it because someone's in your face about how long they've lived at the apartment?
So we know that through our breath, we can kind of regulate our sympathetic nervous system. And that's going to be the one that could push us over the arousal levels and get that like acute stress response, the flight, fight, freeze. And it has to be predetermined for a firefighter to realise that flight, fight, freeze isn't going to be helpful tactic or a strategy to use at an incident.
That's what the public are doing, to be clear.
That's what
the public, they're
doing,
fighting the first responders, or they're running away, or they're freezing. So you can't be doing that.
Yeah. And so again, like having an awareness that is a normal response, but it's an acute stress response, and it's not going to be helpful. So for that reason, like I mentioned, breathing is a tactic, but other tactics can be so self-talk, and this is starting to now show the alignment between the sports psych work and the where firefighters could be going. I think performance triggers, so using certain physical triggers and tapping yourself, or I used to find putting bits of your kit on and doing the straps up nice, and feeling that it's nice and comfortable was something that kind of like sets you into battle mode. When I have done some of the training to manage these incidents, so you're then responsible, like I say, for the plan, how to get firefighters in there, for the hazards that are involved, for the people that need to be trapped, that may be trapped, and how they're going to come out, and also a plan for the incoming firefighters, what you're going to task them to do and how you're going to do all that. A trick was, as a physical cue, was to put a smile on my face, and I found when I spoke to people with a smile on my face, it really slowed me down. And it was quite deliberate, and I'm sure it had some type of reassuring effect on them as well. Yep. And through that training, I was able to realise there's probably only like 5 or 6 bits of information I need to see beyond, what I can. Well, that's about as much information as I can handle at the moment. So I don't want to delve into anything else about the incident. So it's all predetermined. It's all learned that I need to go through these systems. And if I don't go through these systems, if I don't know how to navigate through that kind of pressure, I'm probably going to be overwhelmed. My spinning plates are going to start falling down, and things are going to get a lot harder after that.
Yeah. So you're, without labouring the point, you're working in life and death situations in certain circumstances. So if I was to think about pressure in terms of, on a continuum, you're right up at the pointy end of that continuum. And I would imagine that everyone listening can relate to when they have pressure. And for some, it may be life and death. For others, it might just be a financial thing. It could be a performance thing. What I'm curious about is you're talking about these ways of working, to manage your emotions, to manage that physiological, the psychological response. And some of those things you were saying to me, and I know intuitively what you mean, like breath work, tapping with the kit.
Yep.
What I'm wanting, I guess, to really double down on so people listening can get to is like, I wonder what kind of breath work are you doing? How deliberate are you being? What kind of self-talk are you using? Not so people can then copy it, but they can create their version.
Yes.
And the other thing I heard when you're talking about kit is I would frame that as perhaps it's like a ritual. It's a routine that it's a trigger, right?
Yeah.
Because you've associated that routine with then good performance. So I'm curious if you just like sort of just double down on each one of those things. So when you're talking about breath work specifically, like what does that look and feel like for you?
Yes. So to explain the specific components, I think breath work could be the psychological sigh.
Yep.
Breathing out for longer than I've breathed in helps regulate the sympathetic nervous system and allows again my nervous system to be calmer, reducing the chance that I'm going to have that acute stress response.
Yep.
Because I've practiced it, I'm aware that is going to be the effect of it, and I'm telling myself that I'm aware there could be an acute stress response, and I want to interrupt that. I don't want that to happen. Self-talk is a good one, and again through the training as you do to manage that incident, a lot of people have kind of just little labels you put onto all the hazards or the order of things that you need to do. I think if I probably said like breathe, observe, decide, are 3 kind of simple processes to slow myself down, take some information in, because who would have thought the investment of 1.5 seconds to look around and to label things is a good investment, and then decide I'm looking at those next best actions and how to do it. But certainly the physical cues is something that I've learnt more recently. I love hearing from Dan Carter, talks a lot about standing in front of the goal, kicking a penalty goal or something, and he's feels that self-doubt, some negative self-talk. So his tapping his hands on his thighs is just a way of refocusing back to the appropriate focus, which I think was talking about where he's going to position his feet as he's making contact with the ball. So putting the kit on, like you say, for me, and having it nice and tight is a performance cue that my breathing apparatus set is fitting nicely. So that's going to lead on to my next hose lay going to be nice, and so on through the incident.
Yeah, when I hear it, it's like that. So many people kind of roll their eyes if I'm working in a workshop and I talk about this idea of, if you're under the pressure, just breathe, and people, I've actually had someone in an audience go, seriously, we've waited 45 minutes for breathe, that's all you've got. And my response to that person is, yeah, it is. Your breath is all you've got in that moment, right? Yep. And it's whether it's the psychological sigh like you explained, whether it's a box breathing like Special Forces popularized, whether it's any version of just being mindful and deliberate around our breath, that then I think then leads into that self-talk and, really being conscious about self-talk, about what I am going to do, not what I don't want to do.
Yes.
And then having a ritual attached to it, a physical action, which is the trigger into it. I think everyone listening has a metaphor of a firefight, like whatever their firefight is. And if they could take that and create their own version of that, it would be interesting to see how much better over time they would start performing.
Yep. And like I mentioned, this isn't formalised in the fire brigade training, but I think if I spoke to firefighters, some of the things I'm mentioning are things that are coming naturally to the people who have managed themselves well under pressure. So I'd love to see this kind of introduced more formally as a skill that can be developed throughout people's career.
So when we talk about the training, because I'm fascinated by that, like let's go back in time and say that I was 21, 22 and I passed whatever aptitude. I don't actually know the process, right? Is it a physical test first, or is it smarts test first, or is
smarts, interviews?
Let's say I get through all of that,
yes,
right? And then I'm in.
Yeah.
How on earth do you prepare me to run into a burning building when everyone else is running out? Like what happens after that? After you've assessed, well, he's got the... Take me through that, because I'm fascinated by that.
So Fire Rescue New South Wales has a 12-week course for recruits. They'll have a mix of ages, genders, life experiences, and whether or not you're a firefighter from another organisation or from a military or sports background, you'll all be given the same training, which will prepare you to be a firefighter. It'll prepare you to be on a truck and respond as a firefighter. From a point there, you'll continue to learn and gain experience. But yeah, you'll be trained in elements of all of those roles, like I mentioned, of firefighting, and you spend a lot of time with hose and working in buildings and working as a team, but also elements of rescue, driving the fire trucks, working with hazardous materials, wearing breathing apparatus. Training to be kind of have a medical capability to be able to respond. So you'll be given a lot of training in those areas, and you will inherently be learning, about managing yourself and managing yourself in pressure. You will be trained about how fire brigade will consider your well-being as a firefighter throughout your career. But I'd love to keep growing the concept of decision-making skills, focus and arousal control skills, using visualization as a skill that can be developed to improve your firefighting capacity.
And talk to me about visualization, because obviously in sport it's very, I was going to say very well understood. It's understood, and some athletes and coaches certainly embrace it more than others. In your world, again, is this something that you do a lot of? Is it something that your teammates do? Is it, or is it a bit more hit and miss as to whether people are doing that?
It could be, I think if I said that word, people would be surprised how much of it they are doing without calling it that skill. Again, successful people are probably using elements of it, especially in training. Again, for the incident management side of things, you might drive past a firefighter, and if you see them kind of muttering to themselves as they're staring at a Bunnings or a high-rise, they might be preparing to send all their radio messages. So pre-event, they're kind of like imagining, all right, there was a fire in that building on level 3 and this many people are trapped, and when that happens, I'm going to send a crew here and I'll try to get the fire pumps working here. And so that's kind of a visualization, or at least a mental rehearsal model, which is benefiting that person kind of preparing for their incident management exams. And the same type of firefighter might be thinking if their role was to go inside, how they're going to break down this door or climb a ladder up to that level. So I think there would be a lot of mental rehearsal going on. What the skill is that we could really probably build on and develop formally is that visualization, like sports are using. The alignment between sports, military and the fire brigade is that it's hard to recreate those realistic high pressure moments. I can't go and set these buildings on fire and put people into them, but we can take elements of fires and I guess visuals that you can see on YouTube or that we've experienced in the past ourselves, and then recreate them in our mind. And my understanding is that like a good visualization practice will kind of trick the body, and the body won't realize the difference between the mental rep and the actual physical rep. Yep. When you visualize, you can throw in some challenges that you overcome. So you can visualize to have a really good result. You might break down a simple task like connecting a fire hose from the fire truck over the road to the hydrant and back, and then you just kind of refining that skill. So when that happens, you're better prepared and more confident for it. Or you might have a whole series, like I said, of entering a burning building and having the confidence from doing that too. So that's a skill. That's one that we can do as a development activity.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you say that the brain doesn't know the difference, it sounds really strange to say that, but it's really accurate. You have the same physiological response when you're visualizing really well. I remember I was chatting with Anna Mears, the Olympic cyclist and chef de mission of the team, and she was talking to me about the first time she practiced visualization for what was going to be her first Olympic Games. The psych did such a good job of getting her to recreate the environment and the feelings that she'd have, that when she then went to do her practice run, she was dreadful because she was completely overwhelmed by being at the Olympics. Even though she was just in a practice track at Adelaide. She felt heavy, and it's a really interesting one because I reckon people mindlessly visualize all the time. They ruminate on what's going to go wrong, and they establish that neuromuscular pathway. And then when it starts to go wrong in real life, that's just, here we go again. So again, I'm just hoping that people listening go, this isn't just for fireys. This isn't just for sports people. Like visualize you performing well. Whatever it might be, your presentation to the board, your year 9 class, your conversation with your own teenage kid, visualize it going well. But also, I think there's value, and I'd be interested in your take on this. Visualizing a setback and how you respond to it, is that something that you would do?
No, that's what I mentioned. Is that it'd be important to get lost, and then what you're going to do, not be able to get into this section, lose your partner. Run out of water. These are all things that are really realistic that probably should be expected to occur in the chaos of the initial stages of a fire or whatever other emergency event. And by experiencing that in the safety of a visualization practice, like Anna Mears, she would have been very thankful that she had that bad run that wasn't in the Olympic Games. So put yourself in the tricky situation in that safe place. It also goes to like really dialing up the sensory elements of those visualizations. In the high pressure events, you can lose some of those sensory experiences.
Meaning,
I think like from combat stress, your vision gets narrowed. You lose your blood flow to your peripherals. So your sense of touch, definitely your sense of hearing is that people will often comment, I yelled this at you when you didn't respond because you weren't listening. You were just focusing on running into that, big wall of fire. So again, during that event, if you had interrupted that automatic kind of response and slowed yourself down, you might have better awareness of your senses. And so practicing through your visualization of the senses, having a really strong idea of what does it feel like at different times would be an important thing to practice. So when it does happen, you're better prepared for it.
I love that. So when we're visualizing, it's not just picturing the scene, it's hearing the scene, it's smelling the scene, it's feeling, feeling the scene. Yeah. That's cool, mate. Let's talk about a scene that you know, I don't know how much preparation you did for this, but a couple of years ago, a huge earthquake went through Turkey.
Yep.
And as part of the UN's response, you were sent over as part of the Australian Urban Rescue Team. Can you take us, first and foremost, just bring us into the picture of what that Australian Urban Rescue Team is? You know, the honour that you have representing in that fashion, and then maybe let's explore what it was like getting on the ground in Turkey, because I'm guessing, and I don't know, I'd be keen to hear. I don't know how much visualization you'd have done of that.
Yes.
You know, how much preparation, etc., for that particular scenario. So I'm keen to get into that.
Well, being a firefighter in New South Wales affords you the opportunity to become a rescue kind of specialist, and there's different competencies there, which you can then take on to be an urban search and rescue Category 2 qualified team member. At that point, you are part of a team of which there's 2 in Australia, 1 in New South Wales, 1 in Queensland, that if the Australian government is requested to support for disaster relief, you could be deployed in Australia or overseas to assist. This team's history relates to the Thredbo landslide disaster in 1998, the Japanese tsunami and the earthquake in Christchurch, which were close together in 2012.
Yep.
And then there wasn't an international deployment until 2023, when at 4:00 in the morning on the Turkish-Syrian border, large earthquake just really decimated entire cities. And you've seen some footage of kind of 9 to 12 level residential blocks that had either fallen over completely or begun to fall over. And through earthquakes and buildings falling like that, you'll get survivable voids.
So a survivable void, how would you best describe that?
Imagine, a room in the way that the building had fallen over. Fortunately for some people, elements of that room had stayed intact, so there was a space where people hadn't been crushed inside.
But all exits are blocked, so to speak. They're under the rubble, but there's...
Yeah. You would have had people in the initial stages crawling out from rubble. You would have had people in the initial days who... were lightly trapped and helped out by bystanders. And then over the next 3 or 4 days, up to about a week when the Australian team arrived, you've got people deeply trapped, and you've got buildings that need heavy machinery to access different parts of them, and then to use different search devices to locate and then free people trapped in different elements of rubble. And so the New South Wales team was on call at that time and sent over to respond. I'd been a member of that team just for a couple of years, and I think I spoke to you and the Panthers about the weight I held of putting that uniform on. I spoke to them about that being the equivalent of our representative team. And I guess the important moment for me and maybe others that I talked to was being on a plane and looking up and down at the team of champions that you're kind of in, and needing to decide not to be intimidated and overawed, either by being in that team or going on to respond to the difficult challenges we were being called on to. So a lot of self-talk to remind myself that I had been, chosen to be in this team, and I needed to step up and take actions to continue the good reputation of the team that I'd kind of grown up being aware of.
Did you have that? Did that hit you once you're on the plane, or had you got it? As you're going to the airport, you're going, "Oh, here we go," or
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, when did that hit you, and when did you decide to challenge that negative self-talk, perhaps, or that self-doubt, and step into it?
Yep. Well, both. Yeah, probably related to the travel, because you're traveling military style on a big C-30.
No, yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Comfortable or no?
Royal Australian aircraft. I joked that I had recently been on a holiday with some of my young kids who were crawling over me and punching me in the head. So I found
It was luxurious.
I found them not being there made it quite an easy trip. Also, the fact that it was quite a long trip gave us the ability to reconcile the fact that this was a challenging process. But that it was important for us to put our best foot forward and to take actions that would make the rest of the team kind of happy with what we've done. I spoke also just about the importance of that uniform. Again, it was kind of a rep team, so we had a Australian flag on our shoulders, and I spoke to some of my teammates who's were also on their first deployment, and we spoke about the importance of this uniform and a little bit about our journey that we'd made in this uniform and what it meant for us to be a part of this team and actually being deployed, us acting as custodians, I guess, of that uniform. And that was a really important performance cue for us. It was a good reminder day in, day out that, as times were quite difficult or we had a few challenging days or, obviously being tired throughout, a 2-week deployment, that we kept kind of like tapping that Aussie flag and just a memory of our discussion about, the actions and attitudes and behaviours that we wanted to demonstrate in that uniform to make others proud of us and to signify like our commitment to that uniform and what it meant to us.
Yeah, I love the idea of being a custodian of it. So in terms of going there and landing on the ground, again, for those that may have, it's hard to imagine, but for those who have kind of forgotten the magnitude of that, we were talking like tens of thousands of people.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the death tolls ended up to be over 60,000
60,000 people, yeah.
And we were getting pretty sketchy information about where we were going to be sent.
Yeah.
And that's because the local agencies were overwhelmed, hence calling, foreign governments for assistance. What was easy for us was just to go and help out with what we could. So moving through the city with every other building either fallen or about to fall, we could go through a process of searching what was left. This is an important thing for us to do because the local agencies were at the point of just needing to start knocking down the remaining buildings. So by us clearing them using our search techniques, we're able to allow that to progress. We were able to remove deceased of adults and of children and hand them back to their family members. So before those buildings were demolished, we could kind of recover the deceased and give them like a closure that they wouldn't have otherwise been given.
Which I know from a previous conversation with you was, just framing, just hearing you say it, we've been removing the deceased adults and then children. That isn't, I know I'll sort of be somewhat blunt, but that isn't what you were hoping to be doing, obviously, right? You're the search and rescue team, not the search and recover bodies team.
Yep.
And I know from a conversation we had that there was within the group, there was almost a moment where it's kind of like, what's the point? Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
And I'd love us, if it's okay with you, just to go there and just talk about how the dynamic in your team changed. When you were there, you thought you were going, or you were hoping to go and do the rescue part.
Yep.
And you end up doing what I can only imagine is just bloody awful stuff. How does a team keep their motivation up? How do they look after each other when they're faced with that kind of tragedy on a massive scale?
Yeah. And that was a process the team and some members went through, which was frustration that there was buildings nearby we were working where survivors were being pulled out of, and just by whatever happenstance that the buildings we were searching were not full of survivors. Also frustration that as days went past, it was less and less likely. And I guess part of that long travel over to represent Australia in a different country, apart from self-talk, there were probably people imagining, the great outcome of hopefully saving people. So as it became, more realistic that might not happen, I can understand that people felt frustrated. And I think the leadership within the team, both from the top but just throughout the team, was able to motivate each other. Like I've mentioned, how some members, were just reminding each other of the importance of their conduct as the Australian rescue team. There was other members who, like I mentioned, really talked up that narrative and started to frame that narrative as a very important one, that the effect that you're having on this family and that family is significant.
By recovering.
Yeah, because they were so we had to, you're always working with vulnerable people, and it's always a position of privilege to have people allow you to work, and then being in a foreign country even more so, we're standing on the rubble where people's deceased might be beneath our feet, and so we're very cognizant of that. And so to have the people, family members nearby, with language barriers, made it difficult for us to be respectful enough to the situation. But again, apart from the narrative that was borne up throughout the team, we got feedback from the local rescue agencies really complimenting the Australians as being unique on the way that they went about their work, being very respectful and being very mindful of how they cared for the deceased. And I think they were some important elements in terms of turning those frustrations into feelings that we were having a worthwhile effect, that we were doing good things.
I'm going to tread carefully how I put this, but I know you're a dad of 2 young boys, and as I said, I can only imagine what it's like. I get emotional watching TV shows where there's a kid in, I'm talking a fictional TV show, right? How do you manage that on a, maybe even if we just think about in the Turkey scenario, how did you as a team, because I'm sure you weren't the only father or parent, was there a routine or a process, or was it more just unsaid? You were just kind of, how did you look after each other or how do you look after yourself? How do you look after each other when you're faced with that? And read into that any other trauma, tragedy situation that you turn up in.
In the overseas deployment, being so acute, like our team split into smaller teams. So when you call back up over different meals, or we're staying in a campsite nearby, you're hearing about their stories, and as it turned out, all of the teams were kind of dealing with a fairly significant recovery mission, as it turned out. And I think we all frame, from our experience as firefighters, these incidents as like a detached response. Like, we go and treat those families as if we would want our own family to be treated. But we try not to think too much about their stories and what's brought them there, and the real tragedy of the situation. That, when you're there for immersed in it for a few weeks, becomes more and more difficult. Especially as some of your work sites, you've got these half fallen down buildings, a cross section of a living room or like a young child's room with a cot up there, and you're kind of staring up at that cot, wondering what stories have gone through there before you. And so I think because it was quite acute, we probably leant the other way from thinking, to remove ourselves, to kind of leaning into it a little bit. And as we went on, kind of connecting with the local people and, allowing, some tears to flow. We even visited the site of a nursery where children had passed away, and there's a pretty poignant photos of a local artist who'd gone and tied balloons to different sections of the rubble, each balloon signifying the loss of a child.
Oh, wow.
And so leaning into the emotions of it, I guess, allowed the process of understanding those emotions to begin, and supporting each other. We talked about is really important. Those firefighters and people who made up the team, I guess had like knowingly, put themselves in a situation like all emergency services do, where they can be affected by tragedy and potentially traumatic events. And so it's up to them, I think, have a little personal responsibility to set up kind of support networks to like their colleagues, but also like their families and professionals, to kind of interlace and give them the support they might need if they are challenged by those events.
Yeah. How direct or formal would that coaching be around setting up a network, or is it more left to you need a network and you leave it to the individual, or is it like, here's how to set it up with your partner, or here's how to talk about, I know you have debriefs after each operation after each event, for example, which is probably quite a formal thing, but then whether or not you access a psych as a performative or a well-being or perhaps both element, how direct is that sort of recommended, or is it left to the individual?
There's really clear opportunities to access those resources, and as firefighters and generally emergency services are quite lucky in having much better access than the average Australian to those services. In terms of then being directed to access them, that's more of an individual choice, which I agree with, because individuals kind of have agency in what works for them. I know some incredibly healthy people who have developed incredibly healthy coping mechanisms that may or may not involve different professionals. I personally, like you mentioned, have found use in using a psychologist as like a performance coach as well as a protective factor should I ever need it. And coming back from a particularly difficult incident, having that good relationship with the psychologist means that they already know who I am and how I operate, so I can kind of debrief on that incident in a way that I couldn't probably safely do with my partner.
Or want to do, right? Would you want to even share the things that you go through with your partner, or is it part of you which, no, you don't need to know this or see this?
I think a lot of firefighters think that way. My wife's been incredibly supportive, and we've spoken to each other and developed systems for, I'll open up and let her know what's happened, but I don't need to tell her the gruesome details of some of them, because there's the risk of vicarious trauma if I share too much details. So she'll definitely be aware, and she'll be super supportive of me in ways that we've discussed are helpful to me. So that's how a partner or a family can be really helpful. Whereas a workmate can be helpful in different ways. If they were at the incident, they've obviously been aware of those details, so it's not as dangerous to share with them. But they'll be going through their own decompression and response to that incident, so I might feel limited ability to share with them. And they're at my workplace as well, so some firefighters, although they can use their peers and colleagues as good sounding boards, they might feel a little bit hesitant to completely open up. So the combination of having that colleague who was there, that family who knows you deeply, and that psychologist who is a detached kind of professional level of support is a great setup. Yeah,
and I really I just picked up on that little bit of your partner knows what you need in that, that there's you've had that conversation where you're saying, hey, there are going to be times when ... and I just need ...
Yeah.
And I think that, again, is a really mindful and deliberate way of going about these things, because I do think sometimes people just assume people will know, and then they get the shits when people don't give them what they need.
How about that? And like being aware of what your needs are is important, because I wouldn't be the first person to try to come home and soldier on when if I could have, or someone could have identified, hey, why don't you just take a couple of hours off this morning and just go for a walk, or do whatever it is that kind of helps you wind down and relax.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be more useful than trying to push through whatever these negative thoughts are?
Yeah. So if we take it back to maybe, and just take it down one notch from, or a couple of notches from the turkey scenario, because actually, before we do that, I wanted just to recognize the shift, I guess, in the way that your team was able to move from frustration of their role to actually getting a real sense of meaning from their role, despite them not doing what it was that they came to do, if that makes sense. And that really tied in nicely with this idea I've been playing with at the moment called mental flexibility. So it's not just mental toughness, just keep soldiering on, keep doing, stiff upper lip, all that. Whereas mental flexibility allows us to recognize how things have changed, but allow us to reconnect with our values and in the way that you spoke about. We're custodians of this flag. So what are our behaviors? How's our way of showing up here? More important than the actual, and this is going to sound a bit crude when we're talking about life and death, but rather than the outcome per se, the manner in which we're doing it is the important piece.
So you're highlighting, like, I guess our concept of just focusing on the process rather than the results. So like you said, as we became more realistic that the narrative, the result narrative wasn't going to go the way that we'd hoped, the process was really important, and by focusing on the process, it gave us agency, it gave us ability to do the things that we wanted and we found value in, and that we had a sense of worth and achievement for doing. And certainly throughout that deployment, we were able to show up each day with tools that were working correctly and going through processes, even though things became less and less likely, to give each of those, I guess, survivable voids every last shot that they might be survivable, and we might get a good result from them. But I like talking, like you've mentioned, about I guess adaptability and flexibility. In terms of like where to for mental health for firefighters, and generally for people in Australia, like I think we're turning the corner that it's the mental health literacy, I guess, is improved. I think the stigma around mental health has been reduced, and it's allowed people to kind of, again, like, I feel it's really important that they have agency and they understand what works for them. And that flexibility means that we can have negative thoughts and negative reactions to things. If we can name them, be aware of them, and hopefully come to understand that things aren't good and bad. Like, this isn't a Buddhist thought and Stoicism, really, that it's just an experience. And it's not necessarily good or bad. It's just something that's happened. And how do we want to like move on in our life best from here? That's also the acceptance commitment therapy, which is that cognitive diffusion, as in this has happened. It's neither good nor bad.
It is what it is.
And it's very different to the small S stoicism, which is just like repress it, keep going, tough it out. It's just like, let's be in it and amongst it, and be really practical in terms of getting the best out of ourselves.
So I mentioned before, I just want to dial it back a little bit from the magnitude of Turkey and come back to the day-to-day or week-to-week process of reviewing and recovery. And I'd say they're probably two parts of the same really important process. How do you guys go about reviewing each and every event, or do you only, and I know the answer to this, but I'm just setting you up, like, do you only review it when things go bad? Or how much of a habit do we make the review process? And what does that look like? And then folding into that, how do you then recover to be able to go again?
And to answer the last part first, is we want to recover, we want to go again, and we want to be better for it. If we talk about our incidents being high stakes or high pressure, the consequences are high, so we wouldn't want to make a mistake twice, because that mistake should be costly, and we should learn from what kind of things has caused it. Just as if we've done something well at a high consequence incident, we'd really want to highlight the fact that that's gone well and sustain that for the next time. So yeah, we do review, and we do try to review consistently. An issue with an after action review would be if someone didn't feel safe to speak up and kind of unashamedly explain their perspective and explain what they thought had happened, good and bad elements of it. The risk might be that as a group we kind of don't really learn. We excuse things that have happened when we deep down know that we could have been a little bit better. So running it consistently, good or bad, just makes everyone familiar with the process, and it should hopefully make everyone feel a little bit safer.
Do you think it does? So, like we've said, like broadly speaking, do you feel that the psychological safety or that is that something that's worked on as much as the training? Do you know what I mean? Like, are we as mindful of who's speaking up, who's not speaking up? When they do speak up, what are they talking about? Are they only talking about what they did well, or are they identifying room for improvement? Like, have you got one eye on that or one ear on that as much as you have everything else?
Yeah. Well, if you haven't, you should. Yeah. I think you probably sound like you've been in some. I know I have been in some reviews, and you've kind of realised it's not going to be very effectual. Because we haven't been able to tease out all of those perspectives, including sometimes, the elephant in the room that everyone knows was a significant factor, good or bad. So by establishing psychological safety, which doesn't start by saying at the start of the review, all right, this isn't to point fingers. It starts way before that in the team, and it starts by review after review. It starts after training session after training session. It starts with the way we conduct ourselves and the attitudes and behaviours we display to our team members. They're all the things that make people feel generally safe. So if and when the incident happens, they feel safe to try and to put their best effort forward. And then after the incident, most people I work with are really, keen to start to unwrap it, because at incidents we go to, again, we kind of split up and we've got some, a lot of kind of factors that could confuse things or confuse perspectives. So coming back into a room and explaining, here's what I did, and then Dan can explain what it looked like from the other side, and someone on the fire truck at the street level can explain.
Yep.
And you put together all the pieces of the puzzle, and you start to realise how things actually occurred.
Yep.
And again, we can have psychological safety because our goal, like our shared goal, is to put that fire out, to perform that rescue, to be efficient in the way that we've operated. So if there has been any inefficiencies, that's cool. We want to know about them. Because of the amount of chaos and confusion that can exist in a fire ground, I would say there's a variability in outcomes. You might have a fire that kind of burns down a building, and it would be explained that the firefighters have done a great job because it was such a raging fire that we're lucky that the surrounding buildings didn't burn down. But in a different universe, there might be the same fire and the crew's just a bit quicker out the door, and they're a bit better practice at getting their kit on, and they've taken the right kit up in the first place, and they're well drilled at kind of dealing with running hose out on this type of level, and they actually contain that fire to the room that it started in, which in just a few minutes would burn down the building.
Yep.
And being honest, whether that's the case or not is going to be the key to reviewing it.
Yeah, and the key to improvement.
We want to improve. Yeah, like I said, that's the shared goal. Yeah. So if we can be clear on that, that's kind of how we will improve.
Talk to me about physical recovery.
Yep.
Because it's a taxing thing. What do you do? Like, how important to you is when you're not on shift, you're actually physically, not just mentally and emotionally, but physically looking after yourself, getting some sleep. Like, what does that? are you? I know you're a parent, so
Yeah,
I don't know how
yeah.
much sleep you're getting.
No, yeah, you're right. And sleep hygiene is one of those new ideas that wouldn't you know it, it's just like the most important factor in all of our health. You know, if you're seeing a doctor, you know, no matter your ailment, the first question will be, how are you sleeping? So working as a shift worker, be it a firefighter or any emergency services, is generally unhealthy, being up all night. So I guess prioritising recovery does look like trying to catch up on sleep. Firefighters are quite lucky that they can have some downtime in between their shifts. So, you know, I know that a lot of them prioritise kind of coming home. We normally finish our shifts in the morning. So you come home and you start off the normal day with a little bit of, physical activity, whatever that people like to do, and you juggle your family commitments. But yeah, catching up on your sleep is the only thing that's going to make things better. Firefighters are fit and healthy staff. They're kind of nutrition and sleep hygiene and physical exercise around the shift work and the difficulty of like fatigue. What they do beforehand is what protects them.
Yeah. As we sort of round out, I'm curious to just dig into, like, you are pretty well read, you know, like you know a lot of stuff. You're applying for a Churchill fellowship to study this in more depth. I'm wondering, through all the sort of work and thinking and research you've done, how is the 2025 version of Sam Monaghan, the firefighter, different in the way he thinks about this stuff than the one who was maybe 1 or 2 years into his career?
Yeah. What I'd love is to think about a firefighter who starts in 2025 or in the next few years, and through their training, they have integrated mental skills training. As I mentioned, I've kind of developed a curiosity about it through some imperfect practices and feeling overwhelmed and stressed. And I think as a performance tool, which we know the kind of new generation of firefighters, but generation of workers in general wants to have individual tailored performance plans that kind of meet their needs. And mental skills is that frontier that's a huge opportunity for us to play with. I think sports has obviously worked well in the last 20 years to develop it and normalise it, and to make young athletes think this is the thing which is going to improve me. Similar to sports, whose physical preparation is reached its just about peak. You know, the preparations are pretty much there, and the firefighting operations are pretty much there. You know, like we're quite efficient. We've got some really good equipment. It should be able to work. So the frontier is what's between the ears. The frontier is the ability to develop the skills and techniques that we've discussed today, which people can continue to develop through their careers. And given the opportunity to learn that as they come into the fire brigade, their culture, like their kind of question of how they perform, and looking at firefighting as like a tactical athlete, is going to benefit the organisation as a whole, because you'll have at some point a tipping point of people who see the opportunity to be growth mindset, improving, never a finished product.
Yeah, cool. I mentioned there you're quite well read, and question without notice.
Yeah.
What if you could recommend or one book or what's one book that really fundamentally changed or really enhanced or really promoted your way of thinking in and around either this space or teamwork in general or high performance? What would you recommend? You've only got one.
I'll have to peek behind me and get some tips. Definitely for performance and self-talk, it's got to be The Inner Game of Tennis.
Oh, yes.
By Tim Galway.
Yeah.
So talking about self-one, which is your mind, which is judging, has thoughts, recognises emotions as good and bad, keeps telling your body what to do. Yourself too is your body, which is the doer.
Yeah.
And if we can just kind of leave it alone to do things in its own way, generally can get the job done.
Yeah.
And the analogy is thinking of a baby learning how to walk, and it never stops and says, put your left foot forward, and then, come on, stupid, no, you're falling. Baby just gets up and keeps walking, and they figure it out. So if we can get out of our heads, and it's amazing, this tennis coach kind of became this awesome human performance guru.
Yeah, it's one of the seminal books in the field, isn't it? The Inner Game of Tennis, and you can read it without knowing anything about tennis, just to be clear. So I might put a link in the show notes to that. The other thing I want to put in the link in the show notes would be, Sam, is if people are interested, I know you are keen to sort of share your stuff with teams outside of the fire brigade, wherever you might find them, whether that's corporate teams, sporting teams, school teams, whatever. What's the best way that people could just get hold of you? And I'll make sure the link's in the show notes.
Cool, appreciate that, Dan. I think through LinkedIn at the moment is going to be the best way to contact me before the website's up and running. Whenever that happens.
All right, awesome. All right, well, I'll make sure there's a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. But Sam, thanks for taking time out of your day to come and chat. I'm really glad we've connected, and I'm looking forward to staying connected and doing some shared learning as I keep digging into this space. So thanks very much, mate.
Awesome, mate. Thank you so much.